This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The riots were well planned and we are after the suspects, says the South African president. African heads of state meet to discuss post-pandemic recovery. And at least 150 dead in Europe's devastating floods. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. Africa tourism ministers call for COVID vaccine fairness to help the tourism sector recover. And in sports, reports emerged that Ugandan athlete missing in Japan had left a note saying he wanted to stay in Japan. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. We begin in South Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa says security agencies have identified a number of people suspected of instigating violence in the past week in the country. Ramaphosa says that the events of the past week were deliberate, coordinated, and well-planned attack on the country's democracy. CGTN's Yulisa Njamela has more.
The constitutional order of our country is under threat.
Addressing the nation in a televised national address, President Cyril Ramaphosa made it clear that the instigators of the violence witnessed in the past week are known to security agencies. He was addressing the nation on the riots, which were sparked by the jailing of former President Jacob Zuma. One of the suspected instigators has been arrested and 11 are under surveillance.
The current instability and ongoing incitement to violence constitutes a direct contravention of the Constitution of our country and the rule of law. These actions are intended to cripple the economy of our country, to cause social instability, and severely weaken or even dislodge the democratic state. Using the pretext of a political grievance, those behind these acts have sought to provoke a popular insurrection.
Over 200 people have lost their lives. The government says in total, 2,203 people have been arrested during the unrest for various offenses. President Ramaphosa says those who were attempting a violent uprising have failed.
The ensuing chaos is used as a smokescreen to carry out economic sabotage through targeted attacks on trucks, on factories, on warehouses, and other infrastructure necessary for the functioning of our economy and the provision of services to our people. Despite the widespread destruction, this attempted insurrection has failed. It has failed to gain popular support amongst our people. It has failed because of the efforts of our security forces, and it has failed because South Africans have rejected it and have stood up in defense of our hard-won democracy.
The president acknowledged the government and its security agencies were poorly prepared to respond to the attacks.
While we commend the brave actions of our security forces on the ground, we must admit that we did not have the capabilities and the plans in place as this happened to respond swiftly and decisively.
South Africa has deployed more than 20,000 national defense personnel to assist police in quelling the violence. Ramaphosa cautioned that while calm is returning, those who incited violence are still out there and urged South Africans to work together to stop their plans. Yulisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
More than 150 people have died as floods wreak havoc across Western Europe, causing severe damage. Rescue crews have been racing to find survivors, with hundreds still unaccounted for. Belgium has set next Tuesday as a national day of mourning for those who have died from extreme weather in recent days. In the Netherlands, thousands of people have been evacuated, and the government has assessed the flood as a disaster. Experts say global warming makes torrential rains more likely. Germany alone has reported over 130 deaths, prompting the country to issue a military disaster alert on Friday. Trent Murray has more from Western Germany.
Rescuers race against time in a desperate search for survivors. Over 100 people have been confirmed killed as a result of the devastating floods which lashed northwest Germany Wednesday. Residents have likened the raging torrents of water to an inland tsunami, sweeping away lives and livelihoods.
It's unbelievable because I heard a strange noise when I was opening the front door, and then the water was coming from everywhere, and I just pushed hard to close the door, and I needed the help of my son, and together we could close the door, but from everywhere the water was coming in. There's so many tragedies, so many lives which are gone now, and they're still searching for people, and that's so dramatic and shiver.
Hundreds of people remain missing, with the German military joining search and rescue efforts as anxious families await news on their lost loved ones.
Wir geben natürlich die Hoffnung nicht auf.
We are not giving up hope. People can count on all forces in the country to stand together, from the local to federal administration. And under the very most difficult conditions, we are doing everything we can to save lives and repair damage and avert further dangers.
Well, here in the village of Arvila, the cleanup operation is now well and truly underway. This is one of the hardest hit towns in the region, and businesses here tell me that the waters simply rose so quickly that they had very little time to try and save any stock. Instead, many simply had to abandon their shops and seek safety on higher ground. For business owners like Alexander Petkovsky, the floods have dealt a huge blow.
It's so fast, it comes in 50 minutes, 1 meter water, and I will close up in the store, so I will get up, and I cannot go to my family, nothing, I can't go anywhere. I think it will take months or years to put all, so look at the street. It takes a year to I cannot tell anything.
As rescuers continue to comb through the destruction, fresh questions are being raised about whether early warnings were given to residents in flood zones. But for now, local communities are coming together to search through what remains so they can start to plan on how to rebuild. Trent Murray, CGTN, Arvila, Germany.
Rwanda's capital, Kigali, has been put under a full lockdown for 10 days amid rising COVID-19 infections. The government has also banned movement into and out of the city except for essential services. Rwanda, like many other African nations, is grappling with a third wave of the coronavirus. Over 6 million cases have so far been reported in Africa, with at least 155,000 deaths. The World Health Organization says lockdowns will continue until Africa attains significant levels of inoculation.
We have seen countries go through a wave. Countries start off very well with very comprehensive, strict measures, and then start to relax these measures, and also some sort of fatigue on the part of the population start to take shape. That has happened in many countries, and it probably has happened in Rwanda. You know, we are always seeing an attempt to balance between the need to control the pandemic and the need to enable many activities of daily life to continue. Economic activities, very importantly in countries, education for children, and so forth. It is a permanent balancing act between locking down, controlling movement of people, and allowing normal life, especially economic activities, because we know that there's going to be such a severe negative economic impact in African countries. So it is partly that. And after a year and a half in many communities, people have simply become wary of this abnormal way of daily life, wearing masks, keeping distances, and also being able to sustain some of the measures in terms of hygiene practices to minimize the transmission of the virus.
Cote d'Ivoire's President Alassane Ouattara has questioned the international community's solidarity towards Africa, which has seen unprecedented economic underperformance due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Ouattara was speaking during a summit of African heads of state and the International Development Association in the Ivorian capital, Abidjan. The meeting follows a Paris summit held last May on the financing of African economies. Leaders also underpinned the need for economic transformation post-COVID-19.
In addition to the terrorist attacks, Sub-Saharan Africa experienced in 2020 its most important counter-performance ever recorded, with a negative growth rate of 1.9%. Also, less than 3% of Africa's total population has received a first dose of vaccine, compared to about 54% in the United States and the European Union. Furthermore, while the recovery in advanced economies will be financed largely by trillions of dollars of fiscal measures and extraordinary accommodative monetary policies by central banks, sub-Saharan countries unfortunately do not have the same flexibilities and instruments.
Knowing that most of the people who will fall back into extreme poverty are those with low levels of education, vulnerable employment, and are already in precarious situations affected by droughts and other climatic conditions, we are targeting our actions in three major themes: improving human capital, creating jobs through private sector development techniques, and economic recovery.
We will never tire of calling for an urgent restructuring of the debt, accompanied by a bold policy that goes beyond what is foreseen in terms of special drawing rights to alleviate the present need for immediate liquidity, for the purchase of vaccines, and to lay the foundations for economic recovery.
Nigeria's Food and Drug Regulator has granted the emergency use authorization for 3 COVID-19 vaccines: Moderna, AstraZeneca, and Sputnik V. Authorities say they expect the vaccines to begin to arrive in the country soon. Here's Deji Badmus with more on that story.
The announcement of the 3 approved vaccines is coming at a time of heightened fears about a possible third wave of the pandemic in Nigeria and the detection of the highly transmissible Delta variant in the country. The AstraZeneca vaccine, Moderna, and Russia's Sputnik V make it altogether 6 COVID vaccines that have now been approved for emergency use by the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control, NAFDAC. The agency had previously approved the Indian AstraZeneca vaccine, Pfizer-BioNTech, as well as Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccines for use in the country. But currently, it's just the Indian AstraZeneca jabs which were received through the COVAX facility in March that are being administered nationwide. Now, the Sputnik V vaccine has not been approved by the World Health Organization, but the NAFDAC boss, Mojisola Adeyeye, says it was given conditional approval in Nigeria after the agency carried out independent checks on the vaccine and found that the benefits far outweigh the risk. Over 3.9 million Nigerians have been vaccinated so far, and the government has also said it is expecting about 41 million additional doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca, Pfizer-BioNTech, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson vaccines by the end of September to further boost the vaccination drive. Nigeria aims to vaccinate 70% of its population by next year to achieve herd immunity. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
A team led by the United Nations peacekeeping mission in South Sudan is investigating attacks in the western Equatoria region. An upsurge in armed conflict in the region left at least 3 people dead and displaced many others. CGTN's Daniela Pearson has that report.
Death, destruction, and displacement plagues the residents of villages surrounding Tambura town in South Sudan. And a team including police, peacekeepers, and civilians has arrived there to find out why.
It was a Sunday afternoon when we were surprised by heavy gunfire and saw houses being burned down. We were terrified, but managed to escape deep into the bushes with our children. They killed 2 people. I couldn't identify the armed group, neither do I know which direction they came from.
Officials have recorded the mass destruction of property. Residents who escaped the ordeal have been hiding in the surrounding forest, while others are now in neighboring villages.
We don't know the people who came to attack us. They just suddenly appeared and burnt all our houses. Everything we have ever owned, everything we grow in our farms like groundnuts are destroyed. Even if we return now, there's no shelter. We only have leftover cassava that we collect for food.
The UN peacekeeping mission and other partners are calling for justice for the affected residents as they work to meet people's basic needs.
Over 50 houses burned. We know there's more that we could not reach. With all the belongings of the civilians completely lost, while their crops are growing and spoiling. We have very concerning allegations of killings, of at least 3 killings having been taken place here around Nazareda, with many IDPs having run either to Tambura or to the bushes. So what we can also see, just as we are 9 kilometers now from Tambura, and the whole road is deserted.
A peace deal and transitional government has marked reduced political violence across South Sudan. However, some areas are still experiencing incidents of conflict and revenge attacks. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live. We are taking a short break. Here's what's still ahead. Nigeria to introduce law to reduce number of doctors leaving for greener pastures.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. The Nigerian government wants to reduce the number of health workers leaving the country, especially doctors. It aims to do so with a bill in Parliament which is expected to become law before the end of the year. The government says this has become necessary in its bid to combat the coronavirus pandemic. Correspondent Tessa Makende reports.
Boas Mashaw is a medical doctor in Jos, north central Nigeria, who has been practicing medicine for 11 years. He says his stay in the country is tentative because he's hoping to earn better wages and work in a more advanced environment abroad.
You go to where the pasture is greener. So as soon as I get the opportunity to, I would love to live as well. There are others that have stayed, and they have stayed in the service of the nation for a long time, to the point that they have become professors. But even as at that, they are leaving.
The Nigerian Medical Association says at least 4 doctors leave the country every month, while 8 out of every 10 of them are contemplating leaving the country. Nigeria's health sector has a history of strike actions by health worker unions, calling for better welfare and working conditions.
There needs to be good pay for the workers, good working environment, and good working environment, and the assurance that your safety is guaranteed. The payment of the doctors and other health professionals, medical laboratory scientists, the nurses. There are many of them complaining, but as if nothing is being done about it. So what we have in most cases are promises.
Lawmakers of the National Assembly are now deliberating on a bill that limits the exodus of health workers and addresses their remuneration concerns. But some experts don't think the bill is necessary.
What about those that are in charge of our finances, those that are in charge of our policies? What bill is there to stop them from taking their children out for schooling? What bill is there to stop them from going out to seek for help? That is what we should be concerned about. If a bill to stop the health professional from going out is to be instituted or be passed, then a bill should also be passed that will stop a politician, an average politician, from going out to go and seek for health care.
The Nigerian government has repeatedly called for more patience and commitment from the doctors as the country battles the coronavirus. The government also says it is engaging unions in the health sector on how to do more in funding hospitals across the country and motivate health workers. It has made the medical residency program free for resident doctors and instituted an insurance scheme for health workers across the country. This, it hopes, to go a long way to discourage the exit of workers like Mwas Mashor from the country and ultimately boost its medical sector. Tassim Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
In Uganda, many cases of gender-based violence are going unreported due to restrictions in movement. The country imposed a 42-day lockdown in June to contain the spread of COVID-19, but this is fueling more violence in homes. CGTN's Isabel Nakuria reports.
Alan Zawadi is nursing burns she received when her family's house caught fire 3 weeks ago. She accuses her husband of torching their home intentionally to try and kill her. Before the blaze broke out, she says they had a fight about her partner's extramarital affair, which left her arm broken.
I woke up only to find the house on fire. The mattresses were burning. I could not come out. The window was burglar-proof. I screamed, calling for help.
Alan's case was handled by the local police station in Nankulabye, a suburb of Kampala. Her estranged husband is now on the run. The police family protection unit later referred her to this recovery shelter where dozens of other women and girls facing gender-based violence are supported. They receive legal, psychosocial and medical support.
I would be dead by now because I was in bad shape. You can see the wounds are now healing. I burnt all over my body. I can't even show you some parts that are not yet healed.
Campaigners are concerned that COVID-19 stay-at-home orders are fueling violence in homes. Many of the cases are not being reported, leaving the victims trapped with their tormentors. Activists say this exposes the victims to more risks which could endanger their lives. Women activists say the lack of jobs is mentally exhausting to many couples who are cash-strapped. Police statistics for 2020 show a 29% increase in domestic violence during the lockdown, but the force says the numbers could likely go up this year. 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence in Uganda, according to the Center for Domestic Violence Prevention.
Most people are not able to put food on the table. So this is a challenge. So we are getting many of cases of pregnant women who have been abandoned in their houses by men. And so we really have to respond by giving them whatever they need.
Survivors like Alan are now on the path to recovery but worry they are not safe until her tormentor is in custody. Isabel Nakuria, CGTN Kampala, Uganda.
The COVID-19 pandemic has reduced the income of smallholder farmers in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Many were already struggling to get by before the pandemic due to disruptions caused by climate change and ongoing conflict in the country's east. The situation has worsened a hunger crisis in parts of the country. CGTN's Chris Ochemringa has more from Kinshasa.
Trezo Ekanga has been growing vegetables in Kinshasa since 2018. He's among millions of Congolese citizens who depend on farming for their income. Trezo can't afford to farm on a large scale, and so he grows crops to feed his family and sells whatever is left to earn some money. The COVID-19 pandemic has hit him hard.
I still have the same clients who come to buy my vegetables, but things have really changed. I used to sell 20 bundles of vegetables a month, but I now sell much less. The pandemic has caused a serious crisis.
Farmers growing perishable foods have been the worst affected. This market in Kinshasa is where lots of fruits and vegetables are sold at affordable prices, but the COVID-19 pandemic has caused a drop in demand, which has negatively affected both farmers and sellers like these women. The ripple effects of the pandemic are also being felt by vegetable sellers like Patience Mukwidi.
The sale of our vegetables is very slow. We used to make profit by supplying big restaurants, but we are now making losses because business in those restaurants has dropped due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
A World Food Programme report released in April this year indicated that political instability in Eastern DRC and the COVID-19 pandemic has worsened the livelihood of millions of Congolese citizens.
And the most recent results prove that there are over 27 million people that are in an acute food insecurity situation. Now, this represents more or less 1/3 of the total population.
The DRC is estimated to have 80 million hectares of arable land, but only 10% of it is being used because thousands of farmers have been forced to flee their land due to ongoing conflict. Farmers living in cities like Trésor et Kanga are facing a further challenge, lack of access to credit, which has kept them producing at a small scale and deprived them of an opportunity to reach their full potential. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
July is observed as Mental Illness Month in South Africa. Therapists and organizations treating patients have seen an increase in those reaching out for help. Many have endured the loss of loved ones or been ill themselves. There's been widespread job losses and finances have been squeezed with little certainty about the future. All this is taking a toll on mental health. CGTN's Julie Shire brings us that report.
The last 18 months have been particularly stressful for South Africans, having to endure one of the strictest lockdowns in the world. They've spent long periods in isolation.
When COVID had hit us and we went into our initial lockdown, SADC did see more than double the amount of calls that we received before. And that's sort of either, it's anxiety, it's stress, it's feeling overwhelmed. Our entire lives had changed.
Anxiety is first on the list because it's the most obvious to see, and it's the one that people can identify themselves quite easily. So the population that is really at risk for us is the population that struggles with mood disorders, particularly depression as being one of them.
Over 2.2 million people across the country have been ill with the virus. Many others have had to deal with the pain of personal loss and the passing of loved ones.
The third wave was very difficult, is very difficult. It's spreading. A lot more people are being impacted. A lot more families are being impacted. They're experiencing grief. They're experiencing anxiety. They're experiencing the impact, the financial impact of everything that's happening around them.
To add to the woes of South Africans, parts of the country have been rocked by looting and vandalism of businesses and infrastructure. Food and medicine supply chains have been cut off, mainly in KwaZulu-Natal, the province most affected by the destruction.
With regards to the looting that's happening and just the pandemonium and panic that we are seeing all around us. So that, interestingly enough, is now becoming a very physical threat that can be observed, whereas COVID-19 all along has been an invisible, albeit very severe threat. But now we're having the invisible threat and we are having the physical threat, which we can see in front of us.
It certainly hasn't been an easy July so far for South Africa, despite the spotlight being on mental illness this month. Therapists expect to see a large number of people suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, and there's likely to be heightened levels of anxiety as the country tries to recover from days of unrest. Julie Shire, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
The National Heritage Conservation Commission of Zambia has launched a pictorial display of late former President Kenneth Kaunda. The illustrations are dedicated to the founding father of the country by showcasing his political life. The exhibit has been open to the general public. Kaunda died in mid-June this year in Lusaka after suffering from pneumonia. He had led Zambia to independence in 1964 and served as president until 1991.
In celebrating his life, the Commission put in a few activities. One of the first activity was to put a pictorial display. This pictorial display was meant to interact with the people. especially our first generation who may not have been around the time Dr. Kaunda was in office.
He portrayed the love to everybody, and that's the reason why he lived up to 97 years. For the love that he showed to the people that were there, even when they are fighting for our independence. And everything, he always preached about peace that we need to have as we are right now.
Plenty more to come on Africa Live. Don't go away. Here's a peek at the headlines. Africa tourism ministers call for COVID vaccine fairness to help the tourism sector recover. And over $32 million raised on first day as China launches its national carbon trading market in Shanghai.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Welcome back to Africa Live. We appreciate your company. China has launched its national carbon market in Shanghai with the first trading group covering over 2,000 power companies. The first trading day closed Friday with 4.1 million tons of carbon dioxide quotas worth over $32 million US. China's carbon market comes as part of efforts to meet its goals of peaking carbon emissions by 2030 and achieving carbon neutrality by 2060. Following the launch of China's carbon trading market on Friday, CGTN had an exclusive interview with former French Finance Minister Edmond Alfandri. He is chairman of the task force on carbon pricing in Europe, and he shared his thoughts on China's latest initiative to curb carbon emissions.
This energy transition, which has already started in China, has a catalyst. Its name is the price of carbon. The price of carbon is the best device available. It gives the right signal that it is more costly to use fossil oil and therefore that it pays to shift to clean energy. This launch from national market for carbon is very important.
The next big step for China in its sector is carbon pricing. And one particular difficulty is linking with other countries, for example, the EU. So what are your suggestions?
In the European Union, the price of carbon, which has remained low during a full decade, has increased. It is now at more than 50 euro per ton, which represents some 400 RMB, a level higher than in China. In order to avoid carbon leakage, which is when some industrial firms are induced to leave Europe because of the high cost of carbon, the European Union will, in the coming years, put in place a carbon border adjustment mechanism, which intends to create fair competitions with foreign firms. China will hardly be affected by this levy on the borders, and when it raises its price of carbon, it will reduce the difference, and at the end of the day, it could even be fully exonerated. China has a major advantage to face climate change due to its centralized and planning model. It is probably one of the countries which is the best equipped to cope with the energy transition. A steady and incremental increase in the price of carbon, complemented by a full set of measures in terms of regulation, public infrastructure, support to innovation, many being already in the pipeline, will lead to a very significant reduction of carbon emissions.
African countries need equal access to COVID-19 vaccines to start rebuilding their devastated tourism industries, and that's according to the Kenya's tourism minister. The minister was speaking during a meeting hosted by the UN World Tourism Organization to discuss ways of reviving the sector, including by encouraging inter-African travel. CGTN's Joy Karuki Juma reports.
The tourism sector drives many African economies, but the coronavirus pandemic has exposed its underbelly. According to Kenya's tourism minister, about 21 million jobs have been lost in the sector across the African continent since the start of the pandemic.
In Kenya here is about 1.5 million, so you could see how devastating it is in Kenya. Yeah, but other countries it's not devastating because they have not opened and taken the opportunity and the potential tourism has in their countries.
The challenge of supplying enough COVID-19 vaccines to Africa has essentially put a pause on inoculation. According to the World Health Organization, only 18 million people are fully vaccinated in a continent of 1.3 billion.
We need fairness. The Western world should stop hoarding. Countries order vaccine 4 times their requirements. Yeah? And we in Africa who don't have even 10% of our requirement are denied accessibility. And that is the unfairness we are talking about.
The collapse of the tourism sector has deprived many African countries of one of their main sources of hard currency. Kenya welcomed 2 million visitors in 2019. For the first half of 2021, the tourism ministry reported only 300,000 visitors.
Our target is 2 million because we had 2 million in 2019, but definitely 2019 is a gone year. We need to think differently to create another post-2019.
Balala has called for a single global protocol for travel to apply to all nations. This, he said, is to prevent rich nations from starving their African counterparts of travel and business opportunities. Joy Karuki Juma, CGTN.
Uganda's coffee exports have hit a record high of 6 million coffee bags, the highest total exports recorded in a single year in 3 decades. Latest figures from the state-run Uganda Coffee Development Authority show the country earned close to $600 million in June 2021 compared to about $495 million last year. CGTN's Hilary Ayesega reports.
Uganda is beginning to see a payoff in coffee exports. The country's Coffee Development Agency recorded a 19% increase in exports in June this year. The rise in exports is attributed to the newly planted coffee trees, which have started to yield, supported by favorable weather.
The revenues from coffee has been largely from Robusta, because that's where we have had big increases. We have been, in this financial year, we've been in a fry crop.
Coffee promoters say the rise in prices at the global level have also encouraged exporters to release their stock. Much of Uganda's coffee is going to Europe, but the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions are slowing down the coffee trade. Uganda has been under lockdown for a month now, and transporting coffee out of the farm is now a challenge.
Most of the farmers are stuck with a lot of stock from the previous harvest. And that affects them because that is an entire chain. How are they going to pay all these workers? Because workers still have to harvest that coffee. Workers still have to do the entire thing. How are they going to pay them? Because even us that are buying coffee from them, the market demand is not something that we expected.
Uganda's target is to produce more than 20 million bags by 2035. The country's coffee agency is hopeful that it could see an increase in coffee exports, driven by the increasing global coffee prices because of a reduced harvest from Brazil and Vietnam, who are the top coffee producers. Hilary Ayesega, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
South Sudanese President Salva Kiir has allocated 5,000 barrels of crude oil per day to pay civil servant salaries. The government is struggling to pay its workers regularly as the country's dire economic situation continues to worsen due to inflation and reduction in oil production. CGTN's Patrick Uyet reports.
South Sudan's economy depends on exports of oil. Effects of civil war, COVID-19 and aging oil fields led to a reduction in oil production from 320,000 barrels a day to the current levels of just over 150,000 barrels a day. That has meant that revenue has also fallen, leading to civil servants here not being paid for months. The government now says it wants to allocate 5,000 barrels of oil every day for salaries of civil servants.
I am aware that our civil servants are not being paid on time, and they have endured irregular salary payments for a long time. I'm also aware that salary scales have not been reviewed since we realigned our currency in 2015.
However, the problem here is not just a regular salary payment. Inflation means the highest paid civil servant salary in the country is just $40.
Civil servants have not been receiving that good money. For instance, our soldiers used to receive some small amount of money, like £1,000 for a private gun. But now that the money has been increased to by 100%. I think this money will help them.
People have to have salaries, good money, so that they afford things that are inside the market, things that are being sold, even school fees and all that. So to me, it's a good idea, and I'd like to congratulate the president on that. And another thing, I hope that it will be implemented.
They pay us very less money. We cannot even manage to pay the school fees. So now, I think if do it like that, so it will be better for us all.
The South Sudanese president says his government plans to increase salaries of civil servants by 100%. The government says the first salary adjustment will be made when the new budget is in place. Passing that budget, however, awaits the new parliament expected to be sworn in this month. The government says it plans to use the oil money allocated to salaries to improve civil servants' pay in phases. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Egypt has signed 2 agreements with the U.S.-based Petrochemical Corporation for the design and construction of the largest petrochemicals complex in Africa. The refinery will cost about $7.5 billion and will be located on the Red Sea's Ain Sokna economic zone. From Cairo, here is Yasser Hakim with the details.
The deals with the US-based company Bechtel, in partnership with Egypt's state-owned petroleum engineering companies MP and Petrojet, require them to prepare the engineering and design work for the petrochemicals project. It will also form the coalition that will construct the mega complex in Ain Sokna economic zone on the Red Sea.
We have always suffered from the availability of petrochemical products that are used in many industries. We import 90% of polyethylene and other products at billions of dollars annually. But with the natural gas discovered lately, the country is now able to produce petroleum products using natural gas.
The factory will produce polyethylene, polypropylene, polyester, and ship fuel and other products as well. They will be used in several industries, such as fertilizers and detergents. There are 9 petrochemical plants in Egypt, and 2 are under construction. The largest is Al Tahrir complex, to be built by Bechtel.
The Al Tahrir complex in Ain Sokna that will be ready in 2024 will produce 4 million tons of petrochemicals for the local market and for export, ranking about $8 billion worth of exports per year. The strategy is to revert to added value projects by manufacturing petroleum products and petrochemicals that would reduce imports, especially fuel and diesel, which to date are a big burden on the state budget.
Egypt's petroleum products import bill has dropped from $9.4 billion to $6.3 billion in the last year. The North African country plans to reach self-sufficiency in this sector by 2023. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Somali Trade Show held a trade expo for youth with exceptional entrepreneurial skills to showcase their talent. The event in Mogadishu was organized to commemorate the just concluded World Youth Skills Day.
14-year-old high school student Abdullahi Abdurrahman Mohammed was the youngest participant at this year's trade show held at the Banadir Youth Center in Somali's capital, Mogadishu. Mohammed aspires to be an architect, and today he has presented a two-story building he designed and named the School of Innovation.
Today, I presented this project at the Somali trade show. I have designed other projects thanks to the information I got from YouTube videos, but this is my own design. Everything you see today is my idea. It is called the School of Innovation because it will house 18 classes, 6 stores and 8 offices. I had the passion since I was 7 years old.
Farhiya Muhyiddin Mohammed returned to Somalia from the UAE where she lived for 6 months. At the Somali trade show, she presented her unique business idea on the candle.
For the past few days, we committed ourselves to source employment opportunities for our youth. We have been trying to secure investment opportunities for youth with entrepreneurship skills to give us the chance to invest in the youth who presented their talents here today.
The trade show was a platform for the business community to share ideas for a nation seeking support to establish a conducive investment climate that could boost the national economy. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome into Sport on Africa Live. We begin with athletics news. An Olympic athlete from Uganda has been reported missing from the team hotel in Japan. Now, reports now say the weightlifter who went missing from an Olympic training camp on Friday left a